Hi, everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Working. My name is David Kimmelman, and I created Working to empower and enable people to find career and job success. Throughout this podcast series, I want to unlock your minds and clear any roadblocks you may have to the possibilities of thinking different about your career choices and direction, and how you navigate every step in your journey to get where your heart and soul desires in your career. So each and every human being will at some point be looking for a new job or transition to a new career. And whether you're entering the job market for the very first time, or you are early in your career, you're mid-career, or late in your career, Working is the podcast that will cover all the bases for you. Now, I've spent more than half my life recruiting, hiring, and career coaching thousands of people across multiple industries and numerous job functions, from college students preparing for the job market up through chief executive officers. And as I look back on my career and all the highs and lows, I am fulfilled and proud of having been a part of helping so many people find rewarding careers and jobs. And now, by creating a podcast where I can leverage and share all my years of experience with potentially millions of people, I see no greater reward as I move into the final chapter of my career. So, some highlights of what me and my guests will be bringing to you include, but are not limited to, developing career and job search strategies, creating your uniquely branded resume and your online brand and persona, targeting the right jobs and employers that match to you, and vice versa, the art of networking, interviewing skills and techniques, career transitions, and we will also call out employers on how they can build more authentic and engaging talent strategies in order to attract the best people to their jobs, people like you. So let's get working. My first guest on Working is one of my best friends for 50 years. As this is my introductory podcast, I thought who better to help you become acquainted with me than someone that has known me since I was 14 years old. Not only that, I've spent a good deal of time with him on his own career transitions. So here's a little bit about my guest, Paul Chapin. Paul is a multifaceted career musician, teacher, author, and development officer, and he's built this whole career around education, children, and the world of music. Paul holds a music education degree from Westminster Choir College in Princeton, New Jersey, and a Master of Science degree in educational leadership from the University of Scranton. Paul was a music teacher and principal in Princeton Public Schools for 35 years. He was the head of school at the Newark Boys Chorus School in Newark, New Jersey. He was CEO and president of Capital Harmony Works in Trenton, New Jersey. He spent 40 years as a church musician and director of music there. He is the author and clinician on pertinent topics in music education. And currently, he's a supervisor and content instruction specialist for Princeton University in the teacher preparation program. So, all of that being said, please welcome my guest, Paul Chapin. Hey, Paul.
Hey, man.
How are you, my friend?
Since we were 14 years old.
14 years old. 14 years old. That's crazy.
We've thrown around the 50-year number, but now you told everybody how old we are.
Yeah, I guess I did. Well, you know, when I think about it, I think that is we are 64 years young.
Yeah.
Right?
And still working on this stuff, career and life and all of that.
Absolutely. It's a real look in my, for my career, nobody goes into a career saying, I want to be a recruiter, right? Nobody ever does. I have never met one person that does this. There are people that, do HR degrees and that kind of stuff. But no, not me. Never in my life did I think I would go into being a recruiter and then being an HR executive and now, starting a podcast. Uh, and our paths went two very different ways, right? So, what? Yeah, look, just to get started, I'd just love to, share with our audience a little bit about, you know, I love hearing people's career journeys, right? And I think other people hopefully are interested in that too. So, how about just sharing us a little bit about kind of your journey of how you got to be a music teacher and, and how you built this career this wonderful career you've had.
Thank you. Thank you. When I think back through this, and you and I have talked a little bit about it, it's interesting the pathway that ended up being reality, how much of that was planned and how much of it was not planned. I'll say it that way. David, you and I were singing together in high school, and that's really where I got started in music and thinking that this was a career path. I wanted to be a music teacher. I wanted to be a conductor and musician. What I didn't expect was a love for teaching very young children, and spent 35 years in a school, Riverside Elementary School, teaching very young children, ages 3 up to about 11 years old. I did enjoy the conducting career in addition to that, and that was mostly with adults, with professional choirs, and then in church music as well. Never expecting to end up in a position of administration in school. I went into being a principal, kicking and screaming. I was helping a friend and had no intentions and no real interest, and found that it was very much fun. It was exciting and challenging in ways that certainly I hadn't been challenged with young kids. And that led to eventually taking on the head of school position at Newark Boys Chorus School, which was a thrill. Looking at the achievement of these middle school aged young men in the urban setting, and having come from Princeton public schools, this was a steep learning curve for me. The urban world is very different and exciting, and I liked your word earlier, fulfilling in ways that I hadn't imagined.
Yeah. And that was a significant shift for you. I mean, the transition of going from being a teacher to going to be a head of a school. Okay. I mean, share what that was like for you.
Great. Yes. And you were the rock from many difficult phone calls. Part of the difficulty was going from a very affluent suburban district into the urban setting. But the other piece to this was in the private school setting, much of the work of head of school is not educational, but it's development and fundraising. And I had been near that work, but I had not done it before. And that was an unexpected and exciting transition. Understanding how to tell the story of these young men and the school that I was representing, and getting others to invest their care, their energy, their money in the journey that these boys were taking. uh, remarkably fulfilling. And again, this is the part of the journey that's unexpected. Um, and I was appreciative of your phone calls, saying, how do you think about this? And the questions that you asked me to develop a strategy for my learning and my growth.
Yeah. Well, so it's really interesting because when you think about career transitions, like you said, things come up unexpectedly. Uh, and, there's the saying that, you miss 100% of the shots that you never take, right? And, and I remember, our conversations of, you know, thinking about going in and having to go ask people for money and raise money I mean, this is something you've never done, right? And and for anybody that's thinking about, a career transition and I guess the fear, and the anxiety that comes with all of that, how you know how do you get through that and how do you just eventually take that leap?
So you're hitting on a couple of things that I've been thinking about. I think the first one is how in so many ways your path is an inspiration, has been to me, and I think for others. Um, I I like the slow and steady being the key word. 35 years in one school district is not common. And certainly there are people who do that, but I enjoyed the steady of that. And at the same time, watching and enjoying your your pathway where you would find adventures and you would take risks and you jump into things. um, it's not that you were ignoring the reality of job and
Right.
making a living, and
Yeah.
you know some jobs are a grind and most jobs are a grind at some point. I mean, you didn't ignore that, but you took risks and you found or created very innovative ideas, and you jumped on them. And I think even for someone who enjoys the slow and steady, it's important to see that as a possibility. Um, and that's where your encouragement for me, and this was late in my career, uh,
Right. Right.
saying no, go for it, Paul. How do you think of, that's the other thing. Um, More than simple advice, what you did is asked me questions about uh, how did I reflect on myself? How do I reflect on the situation I'm in? How do I envision what I want to have happen, both in the organization that I was working, but also within my path? And rather than saying do this or try this, um, the questions and the guidance that you provided caused me to develop it really for myself.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. It's just self awareness, self assessment is so important, in every aspect of our lives, but especially, as you look towards work, you look towards building a career. How do you know if one thing might be right versus another thing? And when you are able to really look inside yourself and start to realize not only what you want but what you're capable of doing, um, and and then sometimes again just taking the leap, right? Trusting your instincts. Now look, sometimes it doesn't work out, right? I mean, I've been you have when you talk about my career journey, you know people people's heads would spin, as as they'll learn about my journey from being a professional actor and singer at 19 years old, you know, to, restaurant and going into restaurant management, going into sales, and eventually getting into recruiting and HR. And even within that field of recruiting and HR, I not only led one company through an IPO, I've led other companies as a VP of HR. I was a business VP of business development for a career management company that helped companies to help their employees when they've been laid off, uh, back into HR and recruiting to, 10 years ago, starting my consulting business that I've now been doing.
But don't you think, in so many ways, it's because you've done those things and you've been in those roles with varying levels of success and comfort. But isn't that, to a large degree, why you're in the position now to be doing this?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's true, right? Because I've thought, as I've been, cultivating and researching for this podcast for the past few months and thinking about all this, and going through a lot of self-reflection and looking back at a very long career, right? You went to college. I went to an acting school in Manhattan and graduated, after 2 years, and never got a bachelor's degree. And just started to find my way and make my way. And I look, I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but if I think back to even being an actor, right, and all the roles that I've played, whether as a professional actor or the roles I did for many years in community theater up in Boston and some down here in the DC area, I've been in over 60 plays and musicals. And in playing all of those parts and what you do to research a part, what you do in, acting is about listening and responding on stage, right? You can't just learn your lines and go out there and just speak your lines. You have to be in the moment, listening and responding to the person on stage with you, which is no different than life, right? It's no different than life. And I do feel, and I really appreciate you saying that I really do feel that the through line, where you have this through line of music and education throughout your career and with the transitions you've made over the last several years, that's, my through line has always been people and communication with people in regardless of what I was doing. So I think, I feel like you're kind of onto something there, thinking that my entire career, which, I graduated from acting school in 81. And, so for 44, almost 45 years, I've been in a field of just relating to people and working with people. Yeah.
And I wonder if some of what we have and what we've built and what we've created is because of age and time and experience. But I also think about how one could have soaked up some of that earlier, how I could have soaked up some of that earlier. I thought about this earlier today. I'm much more settled now with who I am, what I have to offer, and what I don't have to offer. And I think back to those earlier years, and it wasn't even that long ago, where I was chasing and not in a bad way. It was exciting, chasing in education the next fad, the next technology, uh, in other ways, the next job, the next position, the next degree program. I was chasing. I was going after, and I always thought of that for myself as growth, and it was. And I think in my interviews and things like that, people saw that about me as growth, and I think it was.
Yeah.
There's a balance, though, that I think was missing earlier, and it's something that I'm finding now is comforting in a way that that with the experience and with certain areas of expertise, and maybe it's only one or two, as Curly said, one thing. Uh, maybe being expert at one or two things is enough, and spending energy figuring out how to deal with all of the other stuff that maybe I can do a little bit, but there's certainly people around me who can do it better, and being comfortable with that. And I think that's what I wish I had more of in balance early on.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think, so it's a very interesting um, dynamic from a generational sense of what was handed down from our parents' generation to us, where and we might have had two different realities there in growing up, where my my family was always about, you got to make money, you got to be a provider, and when I was pursuing an acting career, my parents were supportive to the point where I would also hear constantly, but that's a hard profession, so you should have something to fall back on. So it was never that full encouragement, that full, yes, you go for this with every fiber of your being. And whether it takes you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, just keep going, right? Just keep going. And and I didn't have that. And I think my um my what am I thinking? My confidence, started to wane when I was like around 25 years old, which is, I was also in restaurant management. And I said, oh, well, I can make money there. I'll just continue doing that. Right. Um, and, and then you chose a career that was, like you said, right. It's a very steady career. Right. And it is also a rewarding career. I've shared with you before that one of my all-time favorite movies is Mr. Holland's Opus, right? And you have somebody that became a very reluctant music teacher in that film, and spent his life then doing that, and the people that came back to celebrate him and so on. And so I think about what you've brought to so many children that have become adults that may have pursued music careers, or just music became a big part of their life, right? And so that's where that rewarding thing comes from. So while I certainly understand, why you feel like you feel about, well, I wish I would have had this, this piece of me. But I will tell you that there were a lot of times where that piece of me was not overly fun, because there were times I don't feel like I hit I didn't really hit my stride until I was 30 years old. And when I got into recruiting. But I had also been in management before that. I was managing an extremely busy restaurant, Tony Roma's on 57th and 1st in Manhattan. And I was managing an entire night shift of waiters, waitresses, bartenders, kitchen staff from like 5 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was 22 years old. I think about that now. I think about that going, how the hell did someone give me that job at 22? But
they did.
I loved the energy and the excitement of it. And then I moved with them out to California when I moved to California. And I just loved being a part of that energy, which might be why I loved going into startup companies, and grew a career in startup companies. Just that fuel and that energy and that excitement and that pace. And I guess I've always kind of embraced, change. So
And I think to some degree, as you're talking, that is the fuel that gave you the confidence or the willingness to risk and do different and start up and
I think so.
jump into new. And that's something that I didn't have the confidence to do.
Yeah. And if you do, when we talk about, just kind of going back to that point about the generations, today, unless you're a teacher, right? Unless you go into public service, like, maybe a firefighter or a police officer or something like that, right? Where those tend to be those, longevity careers. Those don't really exist anymore in the public sector, in the private sector.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead. No.
I think when we were growing up, we were still within a generational belief that you went to school to become what you were going to do for your career, and
Right.
the pathway was supposed to be straight and singular. And it was during our generation and our kids' generation where so much of that changed, where the idea of changing careers multiple times became not only okay, but common. I did hear an interesting comment last week from someone who's trying to fill a job, and he's finding that young people are now looking again for the long-term careers, the lifelong careers. And wouldn't that be interesting if there's a shift in that?
Yeah, I wonder if that has to do with, a lot of younger people, and we've seen this, I think, in our families as well, that, are riddled with anxiety, that grew up, having these fears or anxieties about change, right? So that's really interesting. It'll be quite fascinating to see if that comes about. However, and I also think one of the things that's prompting that is all the publicity around AI, and we're going to have probably at least a couple of episodes here that are dedicated to how AI is impacting how you look for a job, how you find a job, how you get a job, how you stay in a job. Because, there's all this sensationalism right now going on around AI. And and about people being displaced and people being replaced. And, we're not there yet. I do believe that there is a definite possibility that that is going to happen, but we're not there yet. So I think people need to start to look at their careers in a very agile way and think about, all right, so this is where I want to go. This is what if I know what I want to focus on, I'm going to do that. But I'm always going to keep my eye on the prize, right? I'm always going to be looking at, okay, what's going on out there? Where if you think about it, a lot of people in our generation and the generation before had their heads down. They got a job and they were going to be focused on that job. And I've come across this so many times in my career in, recruiting in HR and career coaching, where people get laid off from a job, and they may have been there 10 years, they may have been there 20 years, they may have been there 30 years, and they have no idea what they're going to do now, because they've never looked outside. They've never even taken a peek at what might be out there, right? Or what should I be keeping abreast of? I think younger people, certainly I think the Gen Xers and millennials have been doing that, about, keeping their eye on, well, what do I need to grow myself? And in every interview that I have today with, I would say, anyone from Gen Z to a millennial crowd, one of their first questions to me is always, so what does career development look like? Does the company invest in their employees? What are they doing? That's what they're all looking for now.
But it's interesting, the head down idea and not looking is, for me, was based in fear, and unrecognized fear. When I was finishing up 35 years in public school, knowing that this was going to come to an end because I wanted it to come to an end, but afraid to look at what else could be. And you know what? At the time, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like an inability to envision. Well, I can't imagine what. And through time and some therapy, figured out that it wasn't simply a lack of vision. It was fear of envisioning. And that's very real. And look, I was coming from some great success and varied success in different places, and still stuck. Not even out of a job, even within a job, I was stuck.
But you also, if I recall correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you also, I think you also got to a place of dissatisfaction, where you were, right, in your teaching career. And so you got to that place which fueled that kind of desire to say, I think I need to start looking at some other things. And I believe that's when you and I started talking and just kind of even just brainstorming about what kind of ideas might there be or what you want to go. And then obviously as you got connected to some opportunities, and we would talk more about that. But it was, I think it was that kind of dissatisfaction, that kind of
But there was a struggle there. Do I just put my head down and grit it for a couple more years and retire and be done? And it was really through the kinds of questions you were asking me um, about envisioning, and couldn't there be more? And if there was more, what would it be? And he said, Paul, what is it you have to offer that the rest of the world could probably benefit from? Again, I started with this a little while ago. One of the things that I think um, uh, I can't say separates you from others because I haven't really dealt with anybody else, but certainly is your strength. Is among your strengths is you didn't say do this. You didn't say try that. You asked me questions that caused me to develop what was going to be next.
Yeah, it's like the what if scenarios, right? So it's really funny you say that, because for so many years, with my kids, with my three daughters, with other people, I was a fixer, right? My whole MO was, oh, I can fix you. I can fix that. And I wrote in a post on LinkedIn 2 or 3 weeks ago, which I was blown away by, because it was the most, I had almost 50,000 impressions on that post, and I was like thrilled with it. But what I was saying is that I am a work in progress, still at this age. I am still evolving. And I think it's been one of the things that I like most about myself, right? Is that I've really tried to evolve. And especially, since my separation and divorce, which was over 10 years ago now, I really started doing a lot of work on myself. And my kids have seen it, because I was always trying to fix my kids, like even career-wise, and do anything. And, I think when you get to try to fix too many things, you become an asshole. and and uh and I didn't want to be an asshole anymore, right?
I
So
never called you an asshole.
I appreciate that. um but I'm sure my kids did, and even if not to my face. But one of the things that I've really I think changed about myself over the last 5 to 7 years is doing just more of what you were just talking about, is asking more questions, presenting a potential scenario for something, like, well, have you thought about this? Or what would something like this be like? What would you think about this? And then based on the response, you get into a question. This is one of the key things. And, again, for all the people that might listen or view this, one of the key things in interviewing that that I try to share with people, I do this with hiring managers, and I do it with job seekers. An interview should always be a conversation. It should always be a dialogue. And the example or analogy that I've come up with is like, imagine you are invited to a party with a friend of yours, and you don't know half to 2/3, or maybe anyone else at the party other than the person that you're going with. And you get into a conversation. So I've never met you. So I'm like, oh, hi, Paul, I'm David, so, what are you doing here? Who are you here with? Oh, cool. Oh, what do you do? And you take an interest in people, right? And so if you're the interviewee, right, you want to be able to have a conversation, to ask questions about, hey, so tell me more about this part of your company, or ask really good questions about that. And then when you're the interviewer, you also want to be trying to find out about that human being that's sitting across from you and learn about them. And as opposed to just, checking a bunch of boxes on something. And so that is, I think, that has been for me. I've always been like that in my life, talking to people and taking an interest in people and learning about people, and push that into my career. But then I realized I had to sometimes change what I was doing to make sure I wasn't just trying to fix somebody or fix something. And now I have much better relationships with my kids than I think I ever did before, because I'm no longer trying to fix situations for them and just say, well, what do you think you want to do about that?
Taking an interest. You said that now a couple times, and I think that early on you said helping people connect to their heart and soul, and I'm putting those two things together as you speak. Um, Taking an interest in who's sitting across from you, uh, whether it's in a job interview, or the sort of last part of my career was development and fundraising, um, sitting with people who I was hoping to engage in the organizations that I worked for. Money maybe, but to get to their heart and soul and see if they were willing to take an interest in our story. And I think that's where you hit hard, not hit well, I should say, because you caused me to think about, and actually you worked with my daughter Sarah and helped her think through some of this stuff in her career. What is the bottom line here? And in an interview situation, a job interview, how can you get this person across from you, whether you're the interviewee or the interviewer? How can you get to those kinds of deeper level? Because how long is an interview? It's just not that long.
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you're talking to. Um, you've been kind with your words about me possibly being unique in terms of how I go about this business, right? And I, this is also some things that I've written about on LinkedIn, that recruiting is really kind of a lost art, because so many younger recruiters have been forced into, I mentioned this before, being like these box checkers and just going down and saying, okay, you check this, you check. Okay, well, we'll either move you along or we're not going to move you along. When I interview people, and a lot of people are very famously saying, oh, well, you're going to you do the recruiter screen. And I'm like, sorry, I don't do screens. I do interviews. And my interviews typically last anywhere from 30 minutes to over an hour. And because number one, big part of it is trying to make people comfortable, right? And there are many instances when I'm interviewing someone and they are struggling, and their resume looks good. I feel like they've got something to offer us. And so I say, you know what, I want to stop for a minute. And, I think it seems like you're a little bit nervous, right? And I just want you to feel like you and I are just getting to know each other. And we're just having a conversation. We just met in a coffee shop. We just met at a party. We're sitting at a bar waiting for friends, and we're sitting next to each other and we just start talking, right? That's all this is. That's all this is. Don't think that it's more than that. Don't think that you have to go get that job, right? It's like if you're, if you're a quarterback for a football team and everybody else is struggling, people are struggling to get open, your running back's not getting any yards, the offensive line isn't doing much. So you're the quarterback. Now you're going to try to do too much and you throw an interception, right? And it's a similar thing when you're interviewing. Don't try to overdo it. Just be your authentic self and let it go where it's going to go. Because if this job is meant to be for you and you are meant to be for this job and this employer, it's going to happen.
You're going to find it.
And if it's not, then okay, then the next thing will hopefully come along. And I know that might be a little counterintuitive, especially today, because there's so many more people on the market today than there are jobs. So the key thing that I'm hoping to do with this podcast also is to help people find those unique little ways of getting your foot in the door that puts you above the rest, right? And whether that's networking, whether that's sending a message to somebody, how you go about, getting somebody to take an interest in you. There's a ton of ways to be able to do it. And I'm going to go through lots of creative ways that you can approach someone, and you may be very shocked of the kind of results you can get when you start to think outside the box and don't just start applying and clicking and applying and clicking and applying. That's not going to get you a job.
Taking an interest, man, and it's that human element. And you're driving it home over and over again because that's who you are. We're in a time where in education, in the corporate world, checking the boxes is efficient, or is it really efficient? It's efficient.
Who's it efficient for? Right? I am so many organizations, companies they're always trying to figure out what's the process for this, what's the process for that, what's the process for this. And process is important because you want to be able to have consistency and repeatability in things. However, when you over-process, you stifle innovation and creativity. And if you ever want to learn about this even more, read a book by Reed Hastings, who is the CEO of Netflix, and it's called No Rules Rules. And the way that he built the culture at Netflix was to really empower and enable people to be themselves, do things that they think would better the company. And one of their number one rules in their company is, before you do anything, your first thought should be, if I do this, what kind of impact would it have on the company? Right? Will it be positive? Will it be negative? How, is it in the best interest of the company? And if you can say yes, they would give you the green light to go and try something. And it's a really magnificent book. There's just got great things in there. Um,
Wrote it down.
yeah, but it, it's about, when people start getting into all of the process, and they keep saying, well, we need to have a process for this and we need to have a process for that, and they lose any agility.
But
And
the purpose of those processes is misplaced. It's overly heavy in the management need rather than the creative need, or the autonomy that an experienced worker should have. You hire people because of their experience and expertise, but if you ignore that, you're stifling, you said it, the innovation and creativity.
it's funny, years ago, in the first job I had as a VP of HR, was for this startup company in Cambridge, Mass. And this was in the height of the dot-com boom, like 1998. And it was just a hiring frenzy. And, we were in the heart of technology, in Boston. And I came up with an idea that, I sold to our CEO, and I said, I really want to do this. And this is what's happening. And he said, go ahead. And it was a recruiting pub crawl. And I took 5 employees that I hand selected. We all dressed up in our company shirts, and I got a limo for us. And we went to 4 bars in the Kendall Square area of Cambridge, which was just the hotbed of technology companies. And they had these great bars, there. And I would go into the bar and I'd put a credit card down to the bartender, and I said, anybody wearing one of these shirts can buy anything they want. And I would just send out my employees, and we would all go to different tables and say, hey, do you work for a tech company? And they would say, and if they said yes, we're like, hey, can I buy you a drink? And who's going to turn down a drink, right? And we would just start talking to them. And we spent like 2.5 to 3 hours on a pub crawl talking to people. Then I took them all out to dinner and made sure that everybody got home safely. And we ended up hiring 3 people from that evening, right? And my CEO said, if you think it's going to work, and it cost, I think the whole evening cost me like $3,000 to hire 3 people, which when in HR, you're measuring cost per hire, $1,000 per hire is like nothing. So, especially in technology companies.
Yeah, but you didn't call your friend Paulie to say, come on a pub crawl in a limousine. What the hell?
Sorry, man. The next pub crawl I do, you're invited. But it's not. It's probably going to be more of a whiskey crawl.
Okay.
Yep. There we go. And so, bringing that back to the individuals that are looking for jobs and interviewing for jobs, you need to position yourself, not only kind of as a subject matter expert with what you're doing. And I don't care if you're entering the job market out of college, or your early career, mid-career, late career. You've got to find those points that match with the company. So you're researching their website, you're researching their people, you're hitting on all these things that are going to align. And you need to use them as long as you are authentic and you are not bullshitting anybody about what's on your resume, right? Because if they call you out on it and you don't have an answer, you're dead.
Yeah,
you're dead in the water. They're not going to listen to another thing you have to say. But finding that uniqueness and with yourself, and that's what I feel like I've been able to help a lot of people with, is helping them find what's unique about them, what they bring, not only what's tangible, but what's intangible about who they are, what their persona is. And the other trick is you have to be able to ask that company, that employer, really good questions to figure out, is this a place that I can thrive in, right? Is this a place that's going to allow me to be me and do the work? And that doesn't mean they're going to give you the keys to the kingdom. That doesn't mean you should ever expect an employer to do everything you want them to do for you. But, you need to try and find that match. That can help you with longevity in that position or in that organization. And then for the employer, my mantra has always been, my goal as an employer is to help you grow into your next job. And whether that job is with us or somebody else, right? And hopefully, if we're building you up that well, we're going to continue to have opportunities for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, and you're here 3, 4, 5 years, and you get another great job because of the work you did here, I'm satisfied as an employer, right? I'm really happy. And that person will probably want to tell somebody else that, you know what, if you're just getting started or you need something, you should go work for this place because this is what they did for me. And that's that mutual connection between employer and employee, interviewer, interviewee, to find all of that. Yeah.
Amen.
So, yeah. Well, look, I am so grateful to you for doing this with me, helping me introduce myself to the world. I'm so, it's fun. We talked about fear before, and I've said to a number of people, I said, shit, what happens if this is like really successful? Like, I'm doing this on my own. Like right now, people, I want to share with the audience too that, these podcasts are going to be unedited. You're seeing, this is real life, right? This is real talk. This is what's going on. And I do not want to edit my podcasts. People have a lot of choices out there of what they're going to listen to, what they're going to watch. And I'm doing this on a shoestring right now, and it's just, me, myself, and I producing, finding people to talk to, getting good people on here and doing all that. So I was like, what happens if it really takes off? I'm like, crap. Then I got to get a producer. Then I got to get someone who's going to do like social media marketing for me and so on. So it's, it's,
careful what you wish for.
my mouth to God's ears that it's right, that it really takes off and it's great.
Amen.
And if it's successful, I'm hoping that means that, I'm helping people along with my guests that come on, that we are all helping people. And look, we're all in this together, right? I know we're a very divided society today. And AI is making such big inroads and freaking people out. But at the end of the day, it is all about human to human interaction, being there for each other, whether it's at work, whether it's personal life. This is what will keep us going. And I really hope that through this series, I can bring to a lot more people, again, along with my guests, great information, coaching, mentoring, guidance. And by the way, if anybody wants to send me any kind of feedback, I have an email that is feedback@working-thepodcast.com. That's feedback@working-thepodcast.com. And in the future too, I'm going to be doing career makeovers as a podcast. So people that want to send things into me and say, hey, I'm really struggling. I'm looking for a career transition, and you want to send me your what and your why, and send me an email to that feedback email address. I'm going to be choosing people and to talk to and vet about doing an on-air live career makeover that we will go from step A to step, maybe D in one episode. It might take a couple of episodes and then there'll be follow-up. But that's something that I really want to do as well for people. So
Very cool.
yeah. So Paulie, love you, my friend. Thank you so much for doing this. I am so grateful for you in my life and doing this. So,
Friend.
and to everybody out there in my audience, thank you for watching. If you like what this is all about, please watch the other podcasts, share them. Like them on YouTube, share them with your family, with your friends, anybody that you think might be looking for a job. They're going to at some point in time. So please share it broadly. And I look forward to seeing you all in many more podcasts. So thanks again, Paul.
Yeah, man.
All right. Take care, everybody.